In the gloomy darkness of Tokyo's narrow alleys during the fall of 1968, a shadow silently moved through the streets, carrying something darker than the night itself. It wasn't just a series of horrifying murders, but also the desperate cries of a broken soul, caught between personal tragedy and blind revenge against society. His name was Nagayama Norio, the man who spread fear across Japan during a chaotic month. But what was he? A demon incarnate, or merely a human being whose destiny had stripped away all light? Join me as we follow his footsteps, uncovering the darkest chapters of Japan's judicial history and finding the answers for ourselves. In the fall of 1968, Tokyo, Kyoto, Hakodate, and Nagoya witnessed 4 consecutive murders within just 1 month. The victims, 2 security guards and 2 taxi drivers, were all brutally killed. Investigations led the police to conclude that a single perpetrator was responsible. The case shocked the local community, leaving citizens terrified. Under immense pressure, Japanese police deployed extensive resources to scour the areas around the crime scenes, narrowing their focus to over 80,000 suspects. The culprit acted randomly, with no clear motive, and vanished without leaving any trace. The scarce evidence at the scenes made the investigation exceedingly difficult. A few months later, in the early hours of April 7th, 1969, a security guard was on duty at a school in Shibuya Ward, Tokyo. At 1:40 a.m., an alarm suddenly rang from an office inside the school. The guard rushed to investigate and found a man rummaging through the belongings inside. Upon seeing the guard, the man drew a gun, fired 2 shots, and fled toward the nearby Meiji Shrine. Fortunately, the guard reacted quickly and escaped unharmed. This criminal was audacious indeed. Instead of pursuing the suspect, the guard promptly reported the incident at the nearest police station. Recently, a spate of similar incidents across Japan had drawn the special attention of the Tokyo police. They immediately deployed forces to seal off the Meiji Shrine and conduct a search of the surrounding area. Located in Shibuya, central Tokyo, the Meiji Shrine spans 70 hectares of dense forest, making it an ideal hideout. At 5:28 a.m., a patrolling officer noticed a man sneaking out of the forest near one of the shrine's exits. The officer stopped the man and demanded identification. The man stammered and spoke incoherently. As he turned to flee, police lying in wait apprehended him. A search of the man revealed a loaded revolver and 17 bullets in his pocket. He was immediately arrested. During questioning, the man identified himself as Nagayama Norio, a 19-year-old drifter. He confessed to being the sole perpetrator of the recent crimes in Tokyo, Kyoto, Hakodate, and Nagoya. The suspect, Nagayama Norio, was born in June 1949 in Hokkaido. His father was an apple farmer and his mother was a small business owner. The couple had 8 children, 4 sons and 4 daughters, with Nagayama Norio being the 7th child in the family. Due to their busy work schedules, the parents had little time to care for the family. Most responsibilities were handled by the eldest sister, who was 19 years older than Norio. When Norio was 5 years old, his 23-year-old sister was abandoned by her lover and suffered a miscarriage. Overwhelmed with grief, she developed mental health issues and had to be hospitalized for treatment. The burden of taking care of the younger children then fell entirely on the mother. Their father, an alcoholic, was often absent and showed no concern for his children. Whenever he came home, it was only to ask for money from his wife before leaving again. The mother had to juggle earning a living and taking care of the young children, making life extremely challenging. Several months later, overwhelmed both physically and mentally, their mother could no longer support the family. She decided to return to her hometown in Sakata Nagi Village, Kitatsugaru District, Aomori Prefecture. Lacking the funds to bring all her children, she took only 3, leaving Norio and 3 others behind. At just 5 years old, Norio, too young to understand, was left behind unaware that his mother had departed Hokkaido for her hometown. His neglectful father continued to show no interest in his children. For a long time after, Norio lived with his sister, surviving on scavenging and fishing. A kind neighbor, feeling sympathy for the children's difficult circumstances, contacted the local social welfare center for assistance. 4 of the children were subsequently sent to Aomori Prefecture, where their mother was living. Norio was able to attend elementary school, but he often faced bullying from his classmates because he couldn't speak the local dialect. At home, he was further mistreated by his second older brother. The mother also harbored resentment towards Norio because he resembled his irresponsible father. By the 2nd grade, unable to endure the oppressive environment, Norio repeatedly ran away from home, sneaking onto trains in an attempt to leave. However, each time he was discovered by kind strangers who brought him to the police station. The police would then contact his mother to take him back home. This cycle occurred multiple times, causing his mother considerable fatigue and disruptions to her work. Eventually, she decided to change her approach. She firmly instructed the second brother to stop bullying Norio and began treating him better herself. In 5th grade, Norio's older sister recovered from her illness and was discharged from the hospital, returning home. During the time she cared for him, Norio experienced a brief period of relative peace. However, this tranquility did not last long. At some point, the sister developed feelings for a male neighbor and became pregnant again out of wedlock. Tragically, after suffering a miscarriage, she experienced a heart attack and had to be readmitted to the hospital. During middle school, Norio balanced his studies with helping his older brother deliver newspapers to earn additional income for the family. Around this time, he received news that his father had passed away. Having had little contact with his father growing up, Norio held few memories of him. At the funeral, his second brother revealed that their mother had also abandoned them at one point, just as their father had. This revelation devastated Norio. He felt utterly abandoned by both parents and ostracized by those around him. Overcome with despair, he even considered taking drastic actions. From that point on, Norio adopted a rebellious and reckless attitude toward life. He became hot-tempered and violent, often physically abusing his younger sister and niece at home. During the summer break of his 2nd year in middle school, Norio's mother unexpectedly left home to work far away without informing anyone in the family. Although she returned a month later, her departure deeply hurt Norio, reinforcing his feelings of abandonment. Shortly after her return, she suffered a stroke and was hospitalized. Afraid of Norio's violent outbursts, his younger sister and niece spent their days caring for their mother in the hospital, leaving Norio alone at home. Feeling completely deserted, he began associating with a delinquent group. Together, they shoplifted from stores, and Norio would stash the stolen items at home. As Norio approached his high school graduation, he convinced his friends to join him in shoplifting from a store. On the way, he unexpectedly encountered his mother. Overcome with resentment at how she had abandoned him multiple times, Norio felt a surge of anger. He broke into a private home intending to steal clothes and deliberately let himself get caught by the homeowner. However, the homeowner, seeing Norio was still young, decided to forgive him. His mother, however, was deeply embarrassed by the incident. She considered having such a son to be a disgrace and feared being judged by others. In her anger, she expelled Norio from the house. In March 1965, at the age of 16, Norio moved alone to Shibuya, Tokyo. There, he found a job at a high-end fruit shop. Norio was small in stature, standing only about 1.60 meters tall, but he had large, expressive eyes that gave him a bright and approachable demeanor. Customers often felt he resembled a friendly younger brother, which made him very popular. Thanks to Norio's charm and hard work, the shop's business flourished. Recognizing his diligence and quickness, the shop owner entrusted Norio with managing a new store alongside another manager. Every year, the fruit shop conducted recruitment trips to Aomori Prefecture. During one such visit, a staff member stumbled upon Norio's records, which mentioned his past shoplifting offenses. Upon returning to Tokyo, this employee informed the shop owner about Norio's history. Occasionally, the employee would subtly remind Norio to never entertain the idea of stealing again. Norio suffers from persecutory delusions, a form of chronic mental illness characterized by systematic and organized delusional thoughts. These delusions often revolved around realistic situations, such as being watched, poisoned, secretly loved, deceived, or harmed. After being reminded by his colleague about not stealing, Norio became convinced that the fruit shop wanted to fire him. To avoid the anxiety and humiliation, he decided to quit on his own. He approached the owner and resigned. Afterward, he moved to Sanya, Tokyo, to stay with his third older brother. However, after some time, his brother asked him to move out. At this point, Norio began considering fleeing to Denmark. He sneaked aboard a Danish cargo ship at Yokohama port. Unfortunately, when the ship docked in Hong Kong, the crew discovered him and sent him back to Japan. Back in Japan, Norio went to Oyama City in Tochigi Prefecture to stay with his eldest brother. He found a job at an auto parts factory near the local government office. However, his eldest brother showed little interest in Norio, often ignoring him and refusing to engage. Feeling abandoned once again, Norio harbored resentment towards his brother and decided to take revenge. He attempted to tarnish his brother's reputation by shoplifting from a nearby butcher shop. This act led to Norio's arrest by the police. In November 1965, Norio was sent to the Utsunomiya Juvenile Training School. In Japan, juvenile offenders are often placed in such facilities for rehabilitation and education. After reviewing the situation, Norio's family believed he had shown remorse for his actions and decided not to press charges. In 1966, at the age of 17, Norio found a job at a rice shop in Suita City, Osaka Prefecture. During the employment process, he was required to provide his household registration information. Norio's registered address was in Abashiri City, Hokkaido. At that time, a popular movie titled Abashiri Bangaichi had recently been released. The movie depicted Abashiri as a remote, frigid region known for housing many prisoners. Fearing others would associate him with the prison system due to his address, Norio became increasingly anxious. At the same time, the rice shop owner's son traveled to Tokyo on business. Norio, in his paranoid state, believed the son was investigating his background. Terrified that his past would be exposed and that he would be ridiculed or ostracized, Norio decided to quit his job again. Norio returned to Tokyo and started working at a cafe in Jiyugaoka. A few days into his new job, he sneaked into the U.S. military base in Yokosuka to steal, but was caught red-handed. He was sent to Yokohama Juvenile Reform School, where his antisocial behavior led to bullying from other detainees. After a month and a half, his case went to trial at Yokohama District Court's Yokosuka branch. Hearing about his arrest, Norio's mother and second brother traveled from their hometown to visit him. The court, acknowledging his apparent remorse, granted him a suspended sentence, allowing him to avoid prison time. Seeing his mother and brother's efforts to visit him, Norio experienced familial affection for the first time. In April 1967, at 18, Norio was admitted to Nakano High School, affiliated with Meiji Gakuin University in Tokyo's Nakano ward. He excelled academically, quickly becoming the top student in his class. He also found joy in life, joining the school's drama club. To pay for his education, Norio worked part-time at a milk shop in Shinjuku Ward. However, when a court officer visited the shop to check on his progress, Norio misinterpreted the visit as the officer revealing his past crimes to the shop owner. His paranoia flared up again, and he feared being mocked and dismissed. This led him to quit school and cut off all ties with his family and friends. Norio moved to Yokohama Port, taking a job as a dock worker. Around this time, he applied to join Japan's self-defense forces, but his criminal record disqualified him. He returned to Tokyo and found a job delivering milk in Shibuya Ward. One time while working, Norio forgot to turn off the kettle, causing the tatami mat in the store to burn. Fearing retaliation from his co-workers, he stowed away on a cargo ship in Chiba Port, planning to escape overseas. On board, he even contemplated ending his life at sea. However, the crew discovered him and sent him back to Japan. Once again, Norio was sent to a juvenile reform school. During his time there, his third brother visited him, rekindling Norio's sense of familial connection. Encouraged by his brother, Norio returned to high school, where he performed exceptionally well and was even elected class president. However, he interpreted his classmates' vote as ridicule and mockery. Unable to cope with this perceived scorn, he dropped out and returned to Aomori Prefecture. When Norio tried to enroll in a local high school, the administration refused, citing his troubled past. At home, his mother frequently berated him. Desperate, Norio stole money from her and moved to Yokohama Port, resuming work as a dock worker. With his experience, he was soon hired full-time. During this period, Norio's second brother approached him for financial help, claiming to need money for medical treatment. Believing his brother was gravely ill, Norio handed over all his savings, only to discover later that his brother had lied to exploit him. A few months later, Norio was sick and took time off work without permission. As a result, he was fired from the company. With no place to stay, Norio went to his second brother's house to stay, but Norio was kicked out of the house by his brother. From that moment on, Norio was on a path of crime with no way out. On the night of October 8, 1968, 19-year-old Norio broke into the U.S. military base in Yokosuka once again. He stole a .22 caliber revolver, 50 bullets, a folding knife, a camera, 2 handkerchiefs, and some U.S. dollars. Over the next few days, he wandered aimlessly through Tokyo's streets, sleeping on park benches when exhausted. On the night of October 10th, Norio arrived at Tokyo Tower. Tired, he fell asleep on a bench. Around midnight, he woke up and spotted the brightly illuminated Tokyo Prince Hotel nearby. Struck by its grandeur, he decided to visit. At 12:50 a.m., Norio walked to the hotel's south lawn. A security guard patrolling the area noticed him and approached, asking if he needed assistance. Norio pointed toward the main building and expressed his desire to enter, but the guard refused. Enraged, Norio tried to force his way in, prompting the guard to restrain him and attempt to take him to the police station. Fearing that his theft at the U.S. military base would be discovered if he was detained, Norio pulled out the stolen revolver and fired 2 shots at the guard before fleeing. The guard was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, but succumbed to his injuries at 11 a.m. the following morning. After committing the murder, Norio went to Yokohama Station to catch a train straight to Kyoto. On the evening of October 13th, Norio went to Yasaka Shrine in Kyoto to find a place to rest. At around 1:35 a.m., a temple security guard discovered Norio sneaking around and approached him to ask questions. As soon as he saw the guard, Norio immediately thought he was going to be arrested. He pointed towards the front of the temple to distract the guard, then suddenly pulled out a gun and fired 4 shots in a row before fleeing into the nearby woods. Despite being rushed to the emergency room, the guard did not survive and died at 5 a.m. that same day. Through examination of the bullet marks, the police determined that this case and the Tokyo Prince Hotel murder 2 days earlier were both caused by the same gun. The criminal always attacked security guards late at night, and the motive for the crime is still unknown. 5 days after committing the crime in Kyoto, Norio returned to Tokyo to borrow money from his second brother. Norio pulled out a gun and showed it to his brother, saying that he had committed the 2 recent murders. Now that he had no way back, he decided to return to Hokkaido to commit suicide. Hearing this, his brother was extremely shocked and advised Norio to go to the police station to surrender, to calmly resolve the matter, and not to do anything rash. Norio did not listen to his brother. He took 8,000 yen from Ueno Station to Aomori Station, then took a ferry across the Tsugaru Strait to Hakodate, Hokkaido. Finally, Norio took a train to Sapporo. All along the way, Norio kept thinking about going to Sapporo before he died to see the city one last time. Arriving in Sapporo, Norio wandered the streets. Perhaps because he was able to admire the beauty of life again, he gave up the idea of doing something foolish. A week later, Norio returned to Hakodate. The money he had with him was gradually running out. At this time, Norio had the idea of robbing again. At 10:50 p.m., Norio got into a taxi. When the car reached a deserted road, Norio pulled out a gun and shot the driver dead, taking 7,000 yen in cash and some coupons. After committing the crime, Norio fled back to Yokohama. Realizing that the incident was causing a stir in the local community, Norio thought that staying here for too long would expose his crimes, so he continued to flee. On November 5th, Norio left Yokohama for Nagoya. At this time, he only had 2,000 yen left. Norio used his old trick again. He took a taxi to a deserted road, murdered the driver, robbed 7,000 yen, and then escaped to a lumber yard. Within just 1 month, the consecutive shootings in Tokyo, Kyoto, Hakodate, and Nagoya shocked the Japanese public. The Japanese police mobilized all their forces to search all motels and hotels across the country to find the perpetrator. The police had narrowed down more than 80,000 suspects, including Norio. However, because all 4 murders had very few clues at the scene, the police could not localize the subjects more accurately. The case was at a standstill. After committing a series of murders, Norio left Nagoya for Yokohama City, Kanagawa Prefecture, to hide the gun. During that time, Norio was always afraid that the gun would be discovered by the police, so he returned to Tokyo to bury the gun in the forest in Meiji Shrine. Unexpectedly, he was discovered by the security guard and arrested by the police. In August 1969, the case was brought to public trial at the Tokyo District Court. The prosecutor stated that the defendant, Norio, had committed 4 serious murders with the intention of robbery. The defendant's actions had caused the death of others and had an extremely negative impact on society, and he should be severely punished by the death penalty. The defense attorney argued that in the first and second cases, Norio did not intend to kill. When he fired the gun, Norio did not think that his actions would result in the victim's death, so he aimed at non-vital parts. The defense attorney also added that according to the results of a psychiatric examination, Norio was in an unstable or impaired mental state at the time of the crime. Norio denied all the charges of the prosecution. At the trial, he said that the reason for such events was because I was poor and ignorant at that time. I hated everything because capitalist society created poor people like me. Due to the constant change of defense attorneys and many other reasons, the trial was delayed many times. Even the judge in the trial was changed 3 times. 10 years after his arrest, the Tokyo District Court finally made a verdict. The defendant, Nagayama Norio, was guilty of murder and several other crimes, and sentenced him to death. The verdict stated that the defendant Norio had some pitiful circumstances, such as an unhappy childhood, and committing the crime at a very young age. However, the defendant's method of committing the crime was extremely cruel and cold. To achieve his goal, the defendant heartlessly shot the victims to death at close range. The defendant's brother advised the defendant to surrender, but the defendant not only did not listen, but continued to commit the crime. The defendant also blamed society and the country and showed no remorse. The defendant's actions caused extreme anger and confusion in society. After considering all aspects, the jury decided to sentence the defendant to the highest sentence, the death penalty. After the verdict was announced, Norio disagreed with the court's decision and appealed to the Tokyo High Court. During his imprisonment, Norio began writing. He published an autobiography called Tears of Ignorance. The book quickly became a bestseller. After that, Norio continued to write and published many other works. In prison, Norio showed unprecedented repentance. He used all the royalties he earned to compensate the families of the 4 victims and begged for their forgiveness. In the following years, thanks to his frequent appearances in the media, Norio gained many fans. Among them was a girl named Kazumi, who wrote to Norio many times. Later, they developed feelings for each other and got married. While in prison, Norio married Kazumi. In December 1980, the appeal hearing was held at the Tokyo High Court. At the hearing, Norio's wife asked the court to reduce her husband's sentence and hoped to receive forgiveness from the victims' families. Norio himself also expressed deep remorse. Under Japanese law at that time, only those who were 20 years of age or older were considered adults. Minors were protected by the juvenile law. This was a law enacted based on special provisions on procedures for protecting minors in the Criminal Procedure Code. The juvenile law, whose legal number is Law Number 168 of 1948, was promulgated on July 15, 1948. The juvenile law provided for reduced penalties and special support policies for juvenile offenders. The reason for this was that minors were still capable of education and reform. Depending on their age, minors from 0 to 19 years old would be punished at different levels. It is worth noting that minors from 18 to under 20 years old who commit crimes and are sentenced to death or life imprisonment, but are not eligible for a reduced sentence, may be punished as adults. At the trial, the defense attorney argued that at the time of the crime, Norio was only 19 years old, still considered a minor. Norio grew up in an environment lacking in affection and was not yet mentally mature, so his sentence should be reduced. The judge said that Norio had made positive changes in prison, had gotten married, and had received forgiveness from the victims' families. It would be a pity to take the defendant's life at this time. In August 1981, the Tokyo High Court overturned the first instance verdict and sentenced Norio to life in prison. After the verdict was announced, the prosecution disagreed with the court's decision and appealed to the Supreme Court, arguing that the sentence given to the defendant was too lenient. The Supreme Court agreed with the prosecution's view and ordered the Tokyo High Court to retry the case. 3 years later, the third trial was held at the Tokyo High Court. The prosecution argued that Norio had caused the deaths of 4 victims, causing a negative impact on society. Although the defendant was only 19 years old at the time of the crime, still considered a minor, according to the law, the defendant's crime was extremely serious and could be punished with life imprisonment. On the contrary, the defense attorney argued that psychologically, Norio was not yet fully mature. Moreover, after committing the crime, the defendant showed great remorse. According to juvenile law, a person who is not yet fully mature should not be sentenced to death. The Supreme Court held that the defendant's living conditions could not be blamed entirely for his criminal behavior. The court also set out 9 criteria for determining whether to impose the death penalty, including the nature of the crime, the motive for the crime, the manner of the crime, the number of victims, the feelings of the victim's family, the impact on society, the age of the offender, previous criminal records, and the attitude after the crime. The court must consider and evaluate all of the above factors comprehensively, and at the same time balance the crime committed by the defendant with the purpose of crime prevention. Only if there is no other way should the death penalty be imposed. The Nagayama Norio case lasted for a very long time, attracting the attention of all Japanese people. The 9 criteria that the Supreme Court later established were called the Nagayama criteria, and they were commonly applied in criminal cases in Japan. Since then, criminal cases in Japan have applied the Nagayama criteria. Gradually, the Nagayama criteria have become an important yardstick for considering whether to impose the death penalty in the Japanese judicial system. In May 1990, the Tokyo High Court overturned the previous life sentence and reinstated the death sentence for Nagayama Norio. 7 years later, Norio was executed at the age of 48, ending his tragic life. According to Norio's will, his ashes were scattered in the Sea of Okhotsk. While he was alive, Norio always believed that his living conditions and what he experienced as a child were the causes of his tragic life. Before his death, Norio entrusted his lawyer with all royalties from the sales of his books to establish a children's charity. The money will be used to help poor children in Japan and around the world. Norio hopes that these children will be able to get a good education, have a good life, and never have to follow in his footsteps. The story of Nagayama Norio ends, leaving us not only in shock but also a long silence about the tragedy of a human being and the flaws in a seemingly perfect society. Is he a victim or a perpetrator? Perhaps the answer lies in how we perceive misfortune and our responsibility towards the less fortunate. If you are also fascinated by thrilling, mysterious, and humane stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so we can explore more stories together, where the scariest truths reveal the most profound lessons. Leave your opinion in the comments section. What do you think about this tragedy? I look forward to hearing your views. And don't forget, a like from you is the biggest motivation for me to continue bringing meaningful stories like this. See you in the next videos.